Be honest with me, Superman. Does attempted homicide make my butt look big? Sometimes you think a video is gonna go one way and then it just goes another. Livewire, an in-depth discussion on the evolution of Livewire, the missed opportunities, and the surprisingly relevant update that comes from DC superhero girls of all places. In an update that effortlessly grasps some core tenets of social media and the internet age in a manner essential for updating a character like Livewire, which is not so well handled in other places. Looking at you, Burnside Batgirl. I'm Sasha, and this is Casually Comics, and let's take a look at Leslie Willis, aka Livewire. Livewire is one of those characters who bled back into comics after being created in another medium. She is yet another character who debuted in the DCAU, that is, the DC Animated Universe. She first appeared in the Superman animated series in the 5th episode of the 2nd season entitled Livewire from 1997, which was written by Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer. The episode centered around a popular shock jock from Metropolis who had made a career by trashing Superman. The term shock jock itself gained traction in the 80s. This was with the rise of Howard Stern, and the concept was still alive and well in 1997. Shock jocks were hosts who purposely pushed the boundaries of good taste. They shared controversial opinions, or were overly salacious, or swore a lot, or were just rude with tude. This was an attempt to boost ratings and to entertain. Mileage varied on how seriously they took themselves, or on how real or not their personas were, or in other words, how much they actually believed the things they were saying. The genre would eventually have a lot of its salacious nature watered down. This after the passing of the Broadcast Decency Enforcement Act of 2005. At the time this episode aired, Leslie's type of show would have been familiar for most adult viewers, and the episode conveys her attitude well, so even if you're not familiar with the concept, you can grasp what's going on. One of the most important things that this episode gets right out of the gate is showing that Leslie has fans. She has critics and haters as well, but there are also people in Metropolis who enjoy her show.
Hello? Hello? Am I the only one who's physically ill from this town's pathetic devotion to that phony flying Boy Scout?
Amen to that, sister. I hear you.
While having a very loud and bordering on abrasive personality, Leslie also voices opinions that float around the Superman fandom. You've heard some of these things from people who are less than enamored with the Man of Steel, which also helps to ground her because she's not operating out of unfamiliar territory. You hear things like, nobody's that nice for free, he must be working an angle, everything's so easy for him. She also mocks Lois's relationship with him.
So what's the deal with you and Superman, huh?
What are you talking about?
Come on, you're always getting exclusives with them. Just how exclusive are you two?
Now, during the episode, all of these points are juxtaposed with Superman having to do a particularly difficult rescue, so you see that things actually are hard for him. It's not quite as easy as everybody else thinks. This is a nice bit of intercutting that also showcases the divide and difference between experiencing the concept of Superman and actually witnessing or interacting with him. In fact, one of the people he saves is one of the fans of her broadcast. All this is set up in such a way that you get a very good handle on Leslie before she ever becomes Livewire. She has a defensive chip on her shoulder and is quick to lash out. Also, she's an attention seeker, and these things have come together to create a person who's seeking to create a cult of personality. Plus, she's a bit jealous of Superman, and that fuels her resentment.
Baby, to make it in this town, I had to be better, sharper, and louder than any man to get half as much notice. And nothing was handed to me on a silver platter either, unlike your friend Superman.
It's some attitude you have there.
Pays the bills.
The episode does also set up some slight feminist critique surrounding her. She briefly mentions having to work far more hard for her position in the industry than a male radio host would. It's kept quite brief, which works well because it allows the audience to ponder if this is true, which it could be, but it could also be a result of her attitude, which is very confrontational and brash. The idea of using Livewire for feminist messaging will be brought up in various ways across the years and mediums, with different degrees of success. This one is just a blip that potentially could spark a conversation and does work into her character. It helps you understand the perspective that she perceives herself to be coming from, so you can understand her actions more. This episode also calls into question how much she actually believes the things she's saying about Superman. The conclusion seems to be kinda, but that she also plays it up for attention and clout. Lex loves her show, for real. Later in the episode, Leslie is set to have her 3-year anniversary as an outdoor concert, but it's terrible weather, but she won't let the man stop her. And this sequence works well because it's established as Leslie's turf. So you see that she does have a strong following of people who will do what she says. The way Superman descends from the heavens towards her as the crowd gets restless, even though we the viewer or just people with common sense know you can't have an outdoor concert in a lightning storm, this sequence showcases the concept of Superman as a manifestation of authority. And it is slightly imposing, and it does put one in the headspace of understanding that some people would not want to deal with that. In fact, some people are just naturally resentful or rebellious towards authority. It really helps illustrate the point that there would be many people ready to not accept Superman on principle. It's also a moment that highlights that some of our understanding of Superman is obviously filtered through our unique position of the reader and viewer. We get to see other parts of Superman's life that the characters in the universe don't. Leslie ends up getting electrocuted when lightning strikes the stage, and even though Superman tries to save her, some don't think he actually tried to.
How come you didn't push her out of the way?
There wasn't time.
You sure of that?
What are you getting at?
She said some pretty awful things about you. Maybe this was your way of paying her back.
Leslie is one of those people. This is Superman's fault. This accident has changed her appearance and given her a huge power boost. She's essentially a being of pure energy and more than capable of going up against Superman and creating a slick, form-fitting outfit for a killer design that makes her look like a punk rocker lightning bolt. Even though admittedly she does also share a very similar color scheme and at points look to Killer Frost. Livewire then proceeds to terrorize Metropolis, taking control of all the airwaves that causes all kinds of havoc. Those poor airplanes trying to get places. This is so everybody will pay attention to her, which confirms those narcissistic traits that were established before. Superman goes toe-to-toe with her and only defeats her accidentally when she bursts a hole in the dam where they are fighting, which shorts her out and places her in a coma. Livewire was a concept they had confidence in because she was already slated to appear in the Superman Adventures. That was the tie-in comic that was attached to the animated series. And because of scheduling issues, her appearance there actually predates her on-screen one, which may have been confusing for people following both because the comic story that she appears in opens with her waking up from the coma that she's put in this episode. Livewire could have been a very annoying and grating character, and I'm sure for some she is, but there are some things that help her steer clear of that for many. Chief among them is the voice acting performance by Lori Petty. She gives Livewire so much vivaciousness and this mischievous tone that sounds more fun-loving than spiteful, even when she's tearing Superman a new one. She's entertaining, and the end of the episode highlights this. The episode opened with various characters listening to Leslie's show, either enjoying it or not liking it. But the episode ends with characters listening to the radio for updates on Leslie's condition. And in this sequence, the announcers sound so much more staid and restrained that it really highlights why people would enjoy Leslie's show. She had a little bit of extra oomph.
If you ask me, I still wonder if Superman had anything to do with all this. I mean, it's not like we can ask Leslie Willis, right?
This episode also establishes a lot of personality traits for her quite well and sets her up as a powerhouse for Superman to deal with, but obviously a flawed one. She comes out the gate a character, so you can see why people would want to do more with her. The question was, how much could you do? She had a character, but it was one that in current form either had to add to her motivation or potentially have some kind of redemption arc, or risk getting stuck or becoming one note. Either always stuck in this cycle of trying to get back at Superman, or perhaps more in a girls just want to have fun causing chaos mode, both of which would be showcased in the DCAU. Eventually, the DCAU verse would settle on a redemption arc for Leslie. This saw her on a path where her trying to form alliances to get back at Superman did not end up working out in her favor, such as the 10th episode of season 2, Double Dose, where she teamed up with Parasite, in an episode that has some subtle but dark commentaries on sexual violence and the dangers women can face in certain situations. Yes, all people can face this danger, but this episode highlights Livewire, so that's where the concept is centered.
You can look, but don't touch.
Don't be afraid. I know how to control my power.
That's what they all say.
You see as it goes on that her relationship with Parasite just gets more and more dangerous.
You stupid sleaze! I'm pure electricity! 186,000 miles per second! If I say no, it means no!
It's well handled because it's couched inside the dynamic of their villain-villain team-up, so it's not a sledgehammer to the face.
You said no to me for the last time, baby.
Dang, dark. Don't team up with Parasite. You shouldn't be doing that anyway, but this is another reason to add to the list. The majority of Livewire's redemption takes place in the Superman Adventures comic. In fact, in the last two issues, issues 65 and 66. These issues have Livewire realizing that Lex never really was her ally, which she thought he was for a bit, and she ends up on Apocalypse being used as a battery to power Darkseid's war machines. Superman nearly dies saving her in these very romantic looking panels, as Livewire is confronted with the fact that she was wrong about the Man of Steel. He wasn't who she thought he was, and so she defibrillates him to save his life. And then there's this panel where it looks like they're about to make out. Don't make me ship Livewire and Superman DCAU. Then Lois would be free to marry Bruce, just like Zack Snyder always wanted. It briefly looks like Livewire lost her powers. Also, she's blonde now. Guess she dyed her hair black for extra edge. but she gets her powers back. I hope you all appreciated the inherent humor in a shock jock getting electrical type based powers. You may laugh now. Livewire is utilized sparingly in the DCAU. She largely shows up as a nuisance level threat after her initial appearances, and in the comics she only appears 5 times. The last issue, 66, was from 2002, which was also written by her creators from her first episode. It would be a few years before she would make her way over to the DC Comics in the DCU, that's the DC Universe. This was in Action Comics 835 in 2006. This issue was written by Gail Simone with art by John Byrne, inks by Nelson DeCastro, colors by Guy Major, and lettering by Phil Balsman. This story that brings Livewire into this universe utilizes most of the beats from her TV series origin. A lot of things are condensed, and in this she actually gets fired. Also, all of this is unfolding in the midst of a Superman has to save a kidnapped Lois plot. Despite it being 2006, Leslie is still a shock jock. No anti-Superman live journal for her. The comic tries to play with the same rhetoric that Leslie is spouting in the animated episode, but without the lighthearted voice acting performance to accompany it, it comes down more heavy-handed, and you could read it in a lot of a meaner tone than it may be meant to be read. Plus, it's interspersed with some interesting internal monologues. Ever since I was a little girl, ever since I can remember, I knew 2 things for certain: that I had a special talent, and that the boys weren't ever going to let me play on a level playing field. Yeah, this issue is going to try to make what happens to Leslie a commentary on sexism in the workforce. Spoiler alert, it's very clumsy and doesn't land very well. Oh, also, she hates Billy Batson for no reason. They bring up that she has a rivalry with Billy, and then it never matters. Ever, for the entirety of her existence in this universe. This special talent that Leslie has is not annoying people on the radio. No, in this universe she was born with electric powers. This completely alters the dynamic of the story by having her already be special. Now a question that is introduced but not answered is, why did she not use her powers? Leslie is fired by her boss because Superman saved his wife, and he doesn't want her anti-Superman talk, which really isn't that valid of a reason, and she could take action against that. But then he follows it up with the idea that also she's lost the station tons of ad revenue. Why didn't he just lead with that and then keep the other stuff to himself so that, you know, he wouldn't be sued or create a supervillain because it's the DCU? This kind of thing would actually happen a lot to shock jocks. They would be fired because of loss of ad revenue. And you can see that happening in Metropolis, where Superman is their core hero, but then they would be rehired somewhere else. I always knew some guy was gonna take it all away from me. I mean, if the boss was a woman and her wife was saved by Superman, there's no guarantee she also would not want anti-Superman takes, or anybody who had a loved one saved by Superman. But don't think about it. The chip must be maintained, and we need a new reason for her to hate Superman. Because in this, he's not tied to her transformation, since she already has the powers, the base powers anyway. In the show, her transformation was tied to him, which warped her already twisted worldview of him that had been established. Here, she just hates him cuz. I knew this was coming. If a girl's got a big mouth, there's always some guy can't wait to shut it for her. With some small tweaks, this commentary would have worked a bit better. Have him fire her just for the saving, or breach her deal, or try to censor her despite promising her autonomy, something. By adding the loss of ad rates, it muddies the waters, and we haven't spent enough time in this environment at all to get a full sense of it. Also, the dialogue is so on the nose, it at points reads it's farcical, but later on, Lois is going to have some similar style commentary, which is going to be a bit more subtle, which leads one to believe you're supposed to take both of these monologues seriously. Lois's is about people becoming obsessed with her because she works in media. Leslie's moments are further undermined when her coworker says he's sorry that happened and asks if she's okay, she seemingly murders him. She then goes up to the radio tower to, I guess, broadcast herself across the airwaves. It's not super clear what she's planning on saying, and while she's up there, she's struck by lightning, which amplifies her already existent powers, and she becomes Livewire. Now, while the Livewire portions of this story aren't the finest, the Superman portions are excellent. They're very heartwarming. Superman has just dealt with a magical threat, so he was a bit off his game. This story has some really heartwarming bits in it. There's a whole segment in the end about how it's everyday people of the world who inspire Superman to keep going rather than him inspiring them in his eyes, and he views all the people who risk themselves to make the world a better place as exceptional, and how he feels it's his responsibility since he's been gifted these powers by quirk of happenstance to help people. It's really sweet. He's peak nice guy Superman this issue, which is part of what makes it so rough to see Livewire go after him so hard. I don't have time for this, young lady. You better make time, pretty boy. Because there's only room for one ratings grabber in this town, and I think it ought to be someone a little younger and sexier. I hear that a lot, actually. I won't lie. That got a laugh out of me. Be honest with me, Superman. Does attempted homicide make my butt look big? Go to your room, issue 835, and do not come out until you appreciate big butts and no longer lie. Also, that line hurt me. Superman is struggling against her, but his public comes to his aid and throws a sandwich at her. This moment is a good one, but would work better if there had been some establishment of Livewire in this universe. It would have been cool to see her confronted by the regular people of Metropolis on the streets after being isolated in her bubble with her fans. Although in this issue, we don't even see if she has fans or not. It claims that she does, but we don't see it. It could have been a moment where those two realities colliding forced her to re-examine her worldview, or maybe even make her double down her anti-Superman hate. But that does not happen. Instead, the story takes an odd turn, with the man holding Lois hostage revealed to be Livewire's half-brother. So mid-fight, they go with Livewire to where Lois is being held, because she knew where that was. He'd called her earlier at the station. And all of a sudden, narration is about family and doing things for them, because men always be silencing women, and that's not good unless it's your brother trying to kill Lois Lane. The messaging is not aiding this tale. I'm coming, Lois, and don't worry, it's just a speeding bullet, and it turns out I'm faster than those. That's very cheesy, but appreciated. This story appears to be trying its hand at some of the elements that were highlighted in the Superman Adventures comic, such as the aforementioned Superman Adventures number 5. This issue was from 1997 and featured a plot where someone seemingly left the radio stations tuned to the manosphere stations in Livewire's room, and the blatant over-the-top sexism wakes her up from her coma. She decides to take over the airwaves and make it so that only women are allowed to speak. This story goes for an over-the-top, farcical, and comedic tone, but in going so over the top, it allows it to insert these little subtle moments that land harder because they stand out against the comedy, such as Superman having to make a deal with Lex to get one over on Livewire, or how some of the women find they now get opportunities to report in different fields, but have it instantly taken away from them once things go back to normal. And there are some little undercurrents snuck into the issue of people feeling like they're being put back in their place that are well handled. It manages to have these moments that make even Superman pause, and it doesn't try to solve them. Instead, it leaves the reader with a question. Was it so over the top after all? It lets one ponder the idea if some of these seemingly outlandish opinions held by a few aren't still impacting society in various ways. Still, even in this format, some will find it very heavy-handed and unenjoyable, but at least it was integral to the story itself. In the Action comic story, if you remove it, it actually helps the rest of the story make more sense. If you drop that from Livewire's story and framed it as she needs to help her brother out and he's gotten in over his head, and now that she's down her luck too, she's just gone over the edge, it would have helped characterize her in this universe and made her a little bit different. Livewire in this universe also goes through a redemption arc. After her first appearance, she would cast about a bit, popping from series to series and largely just causing mayhem for attention or appearing in the background. People really didn't seem to know how to handle her. In Supergirl number 30, she is set to murder a bunch of people just to get Superman's attention. She goes after Wally's kids when they're out patrolling, and she's juicing on a rooftop just cuz. She's not consistent or focused, and the hating Superman angle doesn't really come to anything. She actually ends up getting over it and working together with him to help save the world from the auctioneer. And he shows her that she can amount to more than she thought, which would have been a nice work back to how she felt earlier about people trying to always take things away from her, specifically men, to being built up by someone she hated so much and showing that the power was inside of her all along. But it didn't end up working that way. Also, it would have been hard to frame it around that first device because of how it was. They didn't bring it up anyway, so it's fine. It would have been nice though if they could have found a way to kind of make it cohere, because it would have made her character feel like she had a through line. After that, she appears briefly when her powers benefit a story, like when she's being drawn to the Scarab's energy in Blue Beetle 15, which then gets sexual. It's making my heart race. I feel tingly all over. You're turning me on. Baby, what you do to me, I've never felt so energized. Why? I do love this panel from this issue. Superman looks so annoyed. The dynamic of Livewire at this point is like Superman is not mentoring her, but watching out for her, trying to make sure she gets a handle on her powers. Her last brush with Villainy in this timeline is during the arc of Superman Grounded, otherwise known as the Superman Walks Across America storyline. In Superman 711, Superman is baffled when Jimmy's Signal Watch takes him to Las Vegas and Livewire has taken hostages. It turns out it's because her power has grown and it's affecting her mind, sending her back into an attention-seeking state. state. So Superman goes and gets his good old Superman electric blue containment suit. It came back, and it came in handy. I'm so glad he kept it. The people at Star Labs are able to modify it so that Livewire can wear it. Once her head clears, she changes that S to an L for branding. And the conclusion of her arc in this universe is she becomes a member of the Supermen of America, which is a Superman squad that Clark puts together to reconcile the fact that he can't be everywhere at once. This is something he came to terms with while he was walking across America. Livewire doesn't fully find her fitting in this continuity. She gets off to a bumpy start and kind of stays that way. There seems at times to be a genuine desire to do something with her, but inside the DCU, she doesn't stand out as much. Her focus is so narrow, it's hard to do large plots revolving around her. She works better in episodic bursts, but tended towards being one note. And she wasn't that unique in that universe overall in terms of the commentary she was making. Lots of people have that to say about Superman. Boo! So her addition, while a nice nod to the DCAU, didn't do much for Superman's or the DCU's lore overall. But hark, the New 52 looms, the reset of the DC universe overall. Again. Livewire would make the jump over to this new universe, which not all characters did. People saw the potential and that the character could be updated, especially in 2011, where relationships with technology and social media and the different ways you could put people on blast had expanded. There were so many new ways that a character could express their hate for Superman. This would ultimately lead to one of the greatest missed opportunities in the comic verse for Leslie, time of recording. Livewire would first appear in the New 52 verse as a background character, as part of a team filling out the ranks, with the assumption seeming to be that you just knew who she was. You've seen her before. This was in Justice League number 30 from 2014. Livewire takes a while to get going in the New 52, and for the most part, she's just used as beyond a background character, like a character on a screen or a hologram, that level of cameo. Her origin isn't given until 2015 in Batgirl 42, in the end of a 2-issue story arc, beginning in issue 41, which is actually the issue with the infamous Batgirl variant cover. The true controversy should have been how this arc does not understand YouTube at all. Which means I finally get to talk about YouTube and the secret intricacies a little bit. How do you feel about the updated look, by the way? It's unnecessary, but I kind of like it. Shoulder pads. In issue 41, Livewire manages to escape containment. She's unsure of who or what she is. She ends up in Burnside, and Barbara remembers seeing her file on the Bat computer and Batman discussing helping Superman with a containment trap, which is how she got trapped in the first place. The images on the screen look vaguely like the Superman TAS episode, including the sequence where she's electrocuted. So Batgirl goes out there and calls her by her name, which jogs her memory, and she remembers, oh yeah, I was a supervillain. Thanks for sparking my memory. Sparking? No. Boo. His. Only bad puns by me and the commenters. Barbara's friend Frankie tries to knock her down, which establishes that Livewire can't be touched. But Batman, who was Barbara's dad at that point, shows up, so a literal bat dad. The next issue, we're given Leslie's new backstory. She was a vlogger. I'm gonna put vlogger in quotes because based on how they describe the content she made, no, she was not. Really, she should have been categorized as a YouTuber because they say that she makes prank videos and makeup tutorials. Okay, time to rant a little bit about YouTube. While you could make completely dissonant content like that, it would be incredibly difficult because of the way the algorithm functions. It places you into a category, and the more types of videos you make in a certain category increases the chance of you being found inside said category. And if one gets lucky and finds success and hits that nice algorithmic boom and gets those views from a specific genre, chances are they're going to stay within that genre. A pivot can lead to a lot of confusion, not just algorithmically, but for your fans. Something an attention-seeking character like Livewire would not want, unless she was pranking while makeuping, which they don't make it sound like that. They say that they're two separate things. Maybe the makeuping was a second channel, but they also don't acknowledge that either. Some YouTubers do get to a point where they can just do whatever, but that's a pretty big point, and that would make her a pretty big YouTuber, and they don't imply that she is. There's a reason why this actually ends up weakening the story itself. This accident that happened to Leslie, which has been uploaded to YouTube somehow by someone, is one of her pranks where she was going to seize control of All Power Metropolis for the lulz. But Superman stopped her by taking her control box, but she tried to do it anyway, because it's just a prank, bro, of steel, and she electrocuted herself and gave herself powers. And then she went on to commit crimes, not specifically against Superman, but just crimes, because she could. Also not pranking or makeup based for the lulz. This is a huge missed opportunity for Livewire. There was so much potential in updating her to be a YouTuber, not a vlogger, because YouTube is not a monolith. There are so many subgenres. BreadTube is not BookTube, is not MovieTube, is not CookTube, is not It's a really good update for her character. It would have blended well with her original origin. You could have made it even better if she had like a TikTok, something where she could do some really small, bite-sized viral videos about hating Superman. Short, snarky, sassy things that would get a lot of hits and a lot of comments and drive a lot of traffic. It would work very well for a commentary on parasocial relationships versus real-world ones. And you could add back in that element of how much does she believe what she's saying and how much of it is being fed by the reaction she's getting to it or the need to drive engagement or create new content. It could have also been a way to explore the way things escalate online. Not always in a positive or negative fashion, but just changing. The element where the media believed that Superman hadn't tried his hardest to save her could also have been reintroduced. It would have been great fodder for one of those rabbit holes. There could have been a conspiracy surrounding this uploaded footage of what really happened. This could have culminated in the reveal of Livewire herself as she has to reconstitute herself. Bonus points if she didn't remember and then had to reconstruct her life from the online clips, which would only have been snippets of a facet of her personality. It could have led to an arc of her having to truly find herself, which could have then led to redemption. The version of herself that she thought she was might not have actually matched who she truly was. For even the most terminally online of people have things that they keep back. It could have been a commentary on online persona versus real world one. How much does a person actually put of themselves online? Which is something that isn't really studied or talked about enough. It's starting to be, but more discussion, more. Her dislike didn't have to remain solely Superman based either. It could have been all superheroes. Her channel could have been traveling to towns full of superheroes, trying to expose them and make them look bad, or talking to people on the streets who want to talk smack about them. You know how many people would have bad things to say about Batman in Gotham? So many. It could even have played with the concept of people gravitating towards her videos because they feel she's more real or honest because she's on new media, whereas in reality she's also being affected by that very new media system. Different perspectives. What I'm saying is that the concept of YouTube and social media is broad. There was so much territory to explore. It could have been really clever and yielded at least one good arc, especially in the Burnside era, which was trying very hard to be more relatable, a more relatable Batgirl. She was hip with the youth and their issues, allegedly. Barbara and her dad ended up taking down Livewire in a nice team-up, father-daughter moment. Without a clear focus in this New 52 and Rebirth universe as it stands, Livewire is an electrical-based villain who does stuff for reasons, like showing up in Superman Red and Blue, because being blue, she fits well into the color scheme. Also, she's briefly involved in helping to save the world arc in this universe as well. But there's something about Livewire that keeps her coming back again and again. The look is part of it, but there's also something in her base personality. The concept of abrasiveness and telling it like it is, in quotes, which can be then used as an entry point to another topic, it's appealing. There's a lure there. And so Livewire has found herself adapted multiple times outside of not just her universe of origin, but the comics. I'll be focusing on the ones where Livewire keeps some vestige of her original origin, so she's still herself in some capacity. Not those appearances where she's just an electrical-based villain that they bring up because you know the name. So, sorry Smallville. Also sorry Young Justice. Also, it has to be a version where she does something other than stand in the background, so sorry Teen Titans Go and sorry Harley Quinn. Time recording. Maybe she'll talk there later. Supergirl brought in Livewire in the 4th episode of the first season in 2015, in an episode that takes most of the TAS origin but applies it to Supergirl, in a universe where no matter what happened, there was no way she wasn't getting fired.
A skirt and tights, please. Seems like overkill, especially since no one is trying to get in there. Or is what's required a softer touch. I mean, she does kind of give off a sapphic vibe with that big old butch-ass chest plate.
So we're back to the shock jock version, but the waters are even more muddy than her first appearance in Action Comics. This is by having Leslie censored by Kat because she's trying to cultivate a relationship with Supergirl, and then forcing her off of her show to cover traffic, even though Leslie's contract said she could talk however she wanted about whoever she wanted.
Grab my hand!
So in this version, you kind of get why Leslie hates Supergirl and Catco. There's not really any kind of commentary being made because Supergirl, even at its finest, was about as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face.
Supergirl. Oh, Cat's stock is plummeting.
Also, she needed a better wig. More wig budget for Supergirl. Hashtag wig life. Livewire's arc in this universe is also one of redemption, where she dies saving Supergirl. She should have stuck to hating Clark. Then at least she would have gotten to live. Then, lo, brilliance from an unexpected quarter. DC Superhero Girls. DC Superhero Girls is an animated series aimed at young girls created by Lauren Faust, who also created My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. It has a very similar structure to that, but it's focused on superheroes in high school. Despite this, and I only say despite this because some may be willing to write it off just based on that description, which they should not, because it has a lot of decent stuff going on. It can be very funny, and it contains a lot of little Easter eggs for longtime comic fans, which can make it a really fun time to watch. Livewire appears multiple times throughout this series, but the one episode dedicated to her really really gets her and brings her in a really interesting direction. It's called #ShockItToMe, because yes, all the episodes start with a hashtag. This was the 11th episode of the first season, released in 2019. In this story, Leslie wants to take Lois Lane's school paper up a notch because she thinks her stories are too puff-piecey and soft.
Look, Willis, you got spunk, gumption, bravado, all qualities of a great reporter. But gossip columns are too mean, and not to put too fine a point on it, so are you. Anything else?
Lois thinks that Leslie is too mean, which prompts her to showcase just how mean she can be. She starts her own website of mean memes, where she utilizes her electric powers that she already has to pull pranks on people and then post the results. And some of them are pretty funny. Sorry, Garth. This says something quite clever. It fuses every single origin together and then updates it with a new angle. Her seeking attention is covered by her desire for internet fame, and she still seeks the traditional media method first, which also brings in her rivalry with Lois Lane. Her always having powers is worked into the story seamlessly rather than feeling awkward, and bypasses having the story have to stop and explain how she got them. Her annoyance at superheroes is spread to all of them, not specifically Superman, making it a broader commentary and giving her more range as a character. Yet it keeps it contained by centralizing it to a core element of online culture in internet trolling. She is specifically an internet troll, and that is where the commentary is gonna come from.
Oh, Garth! Why in the name of Hera do you laugh?
Wonder Woman is horrified by the fact that everybody is laughing at these clips. She's the focal point of this episode because she is the outsider, having come from outside of man's world. She doesn't get it, but the superhero girls say that it's just funny, but she says no, it's not, people are getting hurt. Also, we see that Livewire's pranks are escalating. Like when she goes to the mall and just makes an elevator careen out of control for the lulz. This can be read, if you want to, as a comment on the subtle escalation that happens online. Something that can happen so slowly, or like a frog in a pot of boiling water. Sometimes some feel the need to make their content more extreme, to reach the next level or not plateau, or just to appease their audience. Or sometimes as one creates more and more content, one can become disengaged from reality and not even realize that they are changing or modifying their content. For content creators and their fans are in a closer cyclical relationship than other mediums because of the immediacy of access. So there are lots more factors to consider. One has to take constant stock and be introspective to not be swept up. That, or Livewire is just mean. That's the great thing about this episode. It can work as a deeper examination, or it can just stand on its own. It can just be a fun episode in both contexts. Wonder Woman stops the accident, but her comments about kindness make Livewire feel attacked, and so she tells her to watch her broadcast later. She has a surprise for her, and then she reveals herself as Livewire and takes it up to a whole other level, targeting specifically the superhero girls and their superhero personas, humiliating them.
Livewire here with a major rager invite to all my Shocketeers. Glen Morgan Square, midnight. Come see my most epic prank yet. And super lame-o girls, especially you, Wonder Wimp. Bleh. You should come too.
Now they no longer think it's funny. In fact, they're afraid. They're afraid to go out and be ridiculed even more, especially because everybody's laughing and seems to be enjoying it. It feels like nobody's on their side at all. Livewire then issues a challenge, and Wonder Woman is the only one who can bring herself to face it. This is because at her core, she remains convinced that people aren't cruel. This is a fantastic element to include, especially for a younger audience. Too often, online bullying, harassment, or even just awkward situations and drama is dismissed with a just turn it off, or it's not real. Online isn't the real world and it doesn't matter. While the internet and digital spaces may not be physical, tangible spaces, they can be very real in their reach and repercussions. Now, sometimes those can be overstated and not match the reality, but sometimes they can also be grossly understated. Many times when people face online harassment, they're told to just turn it off. And sometimes that can be the solution, but sometimes it's not. Just because one turns it off doesn't mean it isn't happening, or that everyone else hasn't seen it, or that it isn't going to trickle into real life encounters. Having to face all that can take bravery, even if it's just for something small like feeling embarrassed. Even if it ultimately blows over, it can be difficult to put oneself out there and have to deal with that. It's a non-judgmental look at a more current time of recording issue. Learning to navigate when to engage versus when to disengage is a skill, and it can be quite difficult. Wonder Woman approaches and Livewire starts beating her up, and at first everyone is laughing, but then it goes too far, for there is always a line, and people find they can't watch anymore. The superhero girls rally and Livewire is defeated. And not just that, she starts to lose her followers. Not just because she was cruel and they saw her true face, but because Lois Lane, in her genius, started a website about cats, a cat video website, which brava, hilarious and accurate. None of us can defeat the cats. This update showcases how much can be done with Livewire if you just channel her. It's really good, but also highlights that perhaps she may be one and done type of point, that there are only so many stories to tell surrounding this topic before either it gets repetitive or she heads for that seemingly inevitable redemption arc. Regardless of where she ends up, Livewire certainly makes an impression and has an interesting journey, and people continue to strive to find ways to adapt her, and they most likely will continue to. Maybe, don't hold me to that, maybe she completely vanished off the face of the earth. If Livewire were to be updated again in the comics, what would you do with her? Which version was your favorite? Do you like her at all? Would you keep her as a foil for Superman? In my opinion, it's a good placement for her because he's such a beloved hero, so it makes the contrast and opinion much starker. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Tell me things down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.